dragi kolege I gosti, imam posebno zadovoljstvo.
I have the special pleasure to open the event that represents the media center, and after a lot of difficulties, we don't have a lot the chance that media outlets, Albanian and Serbian ones, meet together to exchange experiences, especially to verify our information and our viewpoints and context that we report from. I have a quotation: high-ranking officials, together with international community members, dictate the agenda, because I read this in the report that I did with Birn Kosovo and Interviews Kosovo. This is true. And instead of our media center here, we meet very often, and we meet very rarely, and we talk to each other. This is the deep polarization. It's one of the key characteristics of both media systems. I'm speaking of Serbia and Kosovo media, and this polarization is noticed in ethnic lines. Kosovo, otherwise, as a topic, is it polarizes Serbian media of Kosovo, whereas within the media scheme, polarization is noticed between pro-regime media and against those media, against whom and against the editorial critique that Belgrade has no influence in the meaning of their redaction, or it has a very light influence. This similar topic has been presented in the report that will be presented some time ago by Tanja Maksic from Belgrade and Krešnik Gashi, a neighbor from Pristina, from Internews Kosovo. And another quotation from this report: this polarization deepens even more in media reporting, inspired by mutual relations that are grave by the propaganda and I would not add anything to this sentence, but I would add something else, and I would wish you welcome, especially to our colleagues from Belgrade and Novi Sad. So welcome. Also from the Independent Association of Vojvodina, together with Internews Kosovo journalists. They will be our guests for the next 3 days, guests of Kosovo, and I wish welcome all of you colleagues that you are following this event today. And finally, I wish welcome to the guests from diplomatic offices, embassies, and international organizations. Now I invite Tanja and Krešnik to tell us what they have concluded in their joint monthly research for a part of a Serb and Albanian media scheme. Thank you, Tanja, and thank you for your welcome. If I'm not mistaken, I was here about 7 or 8 years ago, and I'm glad that I'm again here, and we shall socialize in the next 2 days. As Tanja said, 4 organizations work together in a project which aims to stress what Tanja said, to advance cooperation between journalists of Kosovo and Serbia. And one of the activities that we have thought in this project, and we hope it will be interesting for you for kind of discussion, is the research that shall be presented. And I will present the methodology, since I am the methodology author and colleagues from Kosovo. So we work together in this methodology. And then I shall present the results for Serbia, and Krešnik will present the results for Kosovo. What have we done? We did 942 texts, and it's the contact analysis. It's a relatively known method We got media texts, we dissected them in some various forms. You can qualitatively and quantitatively assess them, and it is important to insert these numbers in a certain context. So we selected them for our category to be the sources that are most frequently quoted regarding relations between Kosovo and Serbia. What topics are in the focus? What is the reporting tone? Is it neutral, propaganding, or critical? What is visual presentation? What are the pictures, videos and visualizations that come together with media text? And were there any grave violations of ethnic standards? The period that we word covers September 2022 and February 2023, and we have selected 15 days. Then we selected 3 additional days to do a shorter analysis of the case study, and we intentionally selected days when tensions in the north were on their peak because we wanted to see how media report, if the topics and the reporting tone vary or change in reporting times. This methodology, as any other methodology, has its restrictions. We could not process all media activity because it is a huge work for the resources, but it enables us to see the main trends. We have selected for our sample 7 media in Kosovo and in Serbia and 6 in Kosovo. And in Serbia, we had Central News and portal Danas, Kurir, Blic, and Novosti. I said that we have processed 7 media, but in fact, we speak of 2 main media narratives, as Tanya said in the introduction. In Serb media, you can clearly see the difference between pro and con government media, and this polarization is very clear and visible. If you look at one and then the other one, then you will think that you are not living in the same reality and in the same place. And I have to say that this division are not only part of the media scheme, but they are part of a wider range of problems that we are coping for the last 10 years. And it's a fact that we are living in a authoritarian regime that limits freedoms and democratic rights. And this deficiency of capacities is seen in all layers of life. Can be a novelty when I say that the media system in Serbia copes with many problems, threats against journalists, and negative campaigns coming from senior officials, editors-in-chief that do not carry out their work, favoring of certain media, pro-government media, through media financing. The list is very long, but we can discuss this later during the debate. And all these impact in lowering the quality of reporting on mutual relations between Kosovo and Serbia. And in fact, and I would like you to understand and read all our results. As in our sample and reality, pro-government media are bigger in number, their voice is listened better, and they in fact give the tone to our public discourse. When we speak of findings, I would distinguish those that were interesting, and I would ask And I would say that this will be in Albanian, English, and Serbian in our website, and you can read them freely. What we have seen is reporting of media for relations between Kosovo and Serbia is intensive. Only the 7 media that we have selected, they publish at least 50 news a day on mutual relations, and most of the content is short news. In our sample, the most inclusive reporting was in December 2022 and 17th February 24, when barricades have been removed and the Ohrid agreement has been signed, and all media got together for the de-escalation of the situation and for lowering the tensions. And the stories are told through the high politics. And what is a real life, what is a reality, people that live here, in fact, remains unnoticed. I will share an experience with you. In media, in Serb media, when you have the presentation as to how Pristina looks like today, you will in general see the cupolas of the university library. And when you come here, you see that Pristina has enlarged a lot of new buildings, but in the news you will not notice them in our media. As it has been expected, the reporting in general goes to the direction of these situations on the ground. And for economic and cultural exchanges between Kosovo and Serbia are almost very rare or inexistent at all. We are not satisfied with the number of sources quoted in our media. We do not have the diversity of voices in the public debate. I will tell you that the president of Serbia is the source of information that is mostly used. 1/3 of the media rely on them, so he has been mentioned 13 times. We processed 500 and more texts. In Serb media, you can almost never hear or listen a quotation or the voice of Kosovo officials, even at the moment when they meet for mutual agreements or international cooperation. You, for instance, will never hear how Kurti speaks, or Kosovo president, or somebody from them. Their statements are usually described by journalists. Also, I have to stress that the reporting way depends on what we speak. If we speak of tabloid media or of the media that observe professional standards, and it is very important to trust the reporting of the daily danas, and I think that these are examples of the media that could be considered as examples of good practice. The lack of perspective of local communities is seen in visual presentations. What we have understood in our research is that in more than half of the texts, the following of visual and media reporting is directed to politicians. You will see pictures of politicians in those meetings, whereas the life of ordinary people or what is the reality in life will never be seen. Only reporting during blockades and barricades was intensive, and it was reporting from terrain or ground, and it was the only exception, if I would say. There was not a lot of reporting that violate the code of journalists. Why we speak of the large number of short news? They are factographic, and there is no exit from the track, and the most number of manipulations is clickbait titles that in our local practice it has been presented as a frequent way of reporting or manipulation. Similarly, it was with our sample. We have grabbed another moment, which in fact is a phenomenon of news that came out as a reaction. Very frequently you will notice reactions of officials or politicians are exempted from the context. They do not know about what event and what are they reacting for. And according to me, it's kind of a manipulation. And a behavior that is not in line with the profession. We have a problem how we conceptualize news about the moment, time. So we do not have that many problems with facts, but with the context. Another reporting dimension that would be very important in the coming days and weeks, since we have elections announced and the topic of Kosovo-Serbia relations is used a lot in internal dynamic between the ruling party and the opposition. In a sense, I expect that at the election campaign, this topic shall be misused a lot concerning the case study. It has been as a kind of a short report that shall follow the main one. And in the study, we analyzed 247 news. They were the dates when these conflicts were at the peak. We finished our research before the Banska case studied, and I don't think that some of the conclusions can be transferred to the other conclusion. And it will be a good basis for the further discussion. The main distinction compared to the general reporting period is that during the crisis, the reporting is intensified and the tone changes a lot. And these changes among media exist deeper. It happens that media, at some moments, they increase the inciting messages that come from politicians, and in those moments they are ready to accuse each other, and with this cacophony of blaming, of mutual blaming, it is very difficult to understand the real situation on the ground and what is in fact happening. What was the inducer of the crisis and how it developed and so on. It also happens in Serbia that during such crisis, the messages are homogenized even more than they are usually. So they read the spiral of the president of Serbia comes out to a press conference and he presents his own impression, and then those impressions are followed and increased by other officials, and it is extended in all pro-government and other media. It also happens that the messages of the opposition politicians were the same as the messages of the official policy, which usually does not happen. And I would just point out, I hope I did not take that much time, that at the time of the crisis, it is necessary to have robust and powerful systems that feed independent media production, because media are the main actors to inform the public fully and objectively. They should help the public to understand the real situation, but I think that we should hold them accountable. This is all for me. Thank you very much. I really liked the last sentence, that we should hold responsible the ones that decide about our lives. I do not have anything else to add. I will pass the floor to Kreshnik Gashi. One of the main stresses in your presentation is what has been done lately, but I would kindly ask you to provide the qualitative part of this report, since, as I said at the beginning, the report was done with joint forces from Bern, Serbia, and Internews Kosovo. Let us see what conclusions has Krishnigashi come out with in the analysis part of Kosovo media analysis. Does not deal that much with the media part of a community media, but the main focus was to measure professional media and to see some of the points that we think they had problems during the reporting. And I think that the main finding of this report consists in the fact that media still did not manage to overcome the fact that politicians should be the first source of information. The statistics shows us that politicians continue to be the first source of information. It's problematic in both countries. And at the largest part of the community, journalists should start to understand the fact that what is written in the law, and it is a principle that politicians are allowed to lie, but journalists should have a filter that do not let politicians transmit the lie and the disinformation. According to the criminal code, politicians have an amnesty on their lies, but in our reports we should take care that when we transmit what politicians said, we should have a kind of control of the veracity and its transmission. There are too many problems that made media in Kosovo to be and to have politicians as the first source of information, and I think that many times this has been motivated or pushed forward from the government institutions. Why am I saying this? If we have a system where for crisis situations and interethnic crisis, politicians are turned into first source of information, we have a problem with the fact that they do not have a veracity filter. Politicians can go to the assembly and say whatever they want, and it can be a source of information. On the other hand, if professional institutions would be the first source of information, prosecution office and police, then we would have another situation on the ground. Because for a prosecution to give the real situation of an incident or interethnic tension, he has some legal filters that will come out the truth. It's worrisome for me the fact that we continue to have the politicians as the main source of information, and we continue to have hesitations at the institutions that should give the information, the true information. The next element that we continue to have in our country is the fact that we continue to close our eyes before citizens' problems and to report only for what politicians want to have in their agenda and want to treat or to address. I cannot understand how journalists can close their eyes before the citizens' problems with water, sewerage, education, health, and so on. They continue to follow the agenda set by politicians, and it is the agenda of interethnic tensions. What is problematic is the manner how the dialogue process has been reported, and there is a situation when people are in an information blackout as to what happens with the dialogue process, what agreements are reached, and in a blackout of the interpretation of what is being spoken in the dialogue. We have seen in the dialogue, we have concluded in the report that the civil society and various experts in some cases are sources of information for the media. But usually the time when civil society and experts are involved in giving information is late, because events develop quickly and we continue to have problems, I would say, in the entire society. Then it brings us to the dilemma that we have when we go home, that we should reinterpret the news to our family members that we have written. And this is because of the fact that Kosovo media continue to have problems in the qualitative writing of information and limited access to the information. We have short text that transmit a lot of information, and this is problematic. If we speak of huge problems, text should be treated in that direction. Normally, for us, it is also a problem that we saw during the analysis. What in Kosovo is translated and transmitted to Kosovo public in Albanian as a narrative that comes from Serbia government. Usually we have non-qualitative translations and the misinterpreted information as to what is said and what is done in Belgrade by Serbia's government officials. What I would like to say here is also linked that besides the fact that the report concludes problems in what has been reported, the level of care of this media in the reporting for crisis situations was to be admired. And I would say that there is a good ethics in Kosovo media to control the information that is published and not to allow disinformation that incites hatred or conflict to be transmitted. There is such a tendency. But there continue to be problems with the clickbait titles and the manner how they place the information. There are problems concerning the manner how it has been designed, or simply how the state is transmitting the information to the journalists. We have a lot of critics here because journalists in many cases did not manage to take the stand of the government or law enforcement authorities, but you could not get such information on the situation, and it should be a big critique, because blaming journalists for the quality of their work should be returned to blaming on the people who should provide the information and make the information clear. If we are reporting for a situation of tensions or of crisis, your only source of information are non-official sources, and then this becomes problematic because disinformation in such a case is very big. If your source is credible, police, prosecution office, other institutions, then we can have a better situation. In Kosovo, we continue to have ministers who do not give interviews for media. We continue to have mayors who do not make statements to media. We continue to have people who are involved in the dialogue process and they reject to give information or statements to media and to say what's happening there. We continue to have police and prosecutors who do not provide us information. Here we should add another element, that we continue to have the community which is frightened to speak publicly about the reality in the media. I cannot hide the fact that even though we have a good level of freedom of speech, people are scared to come out and speak the truth and to say what they think about the government, the institutions, the events that are going on. That's why we should work more on freedom of speech and freedom of people to speak their own opinion. There are some elements that censor or increase freedom of speech in Kosovo. One of them was the punishment of those who spoke publicly for certain issues, dismissals, other pressures, and so on. But now we are in the situation where we have the special war, hybrid war against people who can freely express their opinion through the common producing factories, through hybrid war against people who try to speak the truth or a different opinion about events that are going on. Those who dare to come out against the information given by politicians, against those that are disinforming us, they confront a great war in internet or battle in internet with a language of hatred, and it's a bad fact that we are to conclude that lately in Kosovo we have an increase of reporting of people who denounce at the police that they are threatened because they express their own opinion freely. We have people who have been arrested for these things. I don't think this is the solution, but if people have something to say against opinions, they should say it in a civilized way and not with comments and offenses as we have seen. It is difficult to be in the middle and to maintain the professional level for journalists and for media. And I think that I would say by analyzing the value of this report, it is very good for media to sit and read the reports that are provided in this form. Because, as we know, Kosovo media do not have sufficient capacities to go back once in a month and to analyze the content that they have produced to see if they did good or bad with the content and the standards. And I think that such reports where media are told some points where they are making a mistake, I would say sometimes unintentionally, they help them in advancing and regulating their professional standards. These should be done by institutions responsible for this one. Independent Media Commission and the Media Council, but these mechanisms do not have the potential to do such monitoring and such analysis, and it is the civil society organizations who are supposed to do these analyses and provide them. I think that there is a need not only reporting of the interethnic style, but the manner how the information is provided, but every reporting sector should be seen in media in Kosovo and Serbia in order to have a constructive critique and an increase of professional reporting. What we can say is that in Kosovo we continue to have media that want to report professionally and they want to abide by the standards, but it is an issue of capacities and the real possibility to obtain the true information. I would say that as a report, I think it helps a lot to media to see where they are and maybe to go back to the editorial office and to advise journalists to change this wrong logic, where the politician is the main source of information, or I would say it's worrisome that it is the only source of information. I'm correcting myself. When the politician is the only source of information, I think that we have not carried out our obligation as a journalist to inform the citizen. If we have some politicians of some sources, then the rules that we learned in the journalism school, that the information should have at least 3 sources, then we can respect and we can be successful in this direction. Thank you. Thank you, Kreshnik. I think that you provided us a challenge now, I would say. So we all failed in the exam. If politicians are the main source of information, this is true. And I think that in the course of conversation, we shall see what are the real possibilities. I will mention one thing that Kreshnik mentioned. This is the fight by the majority, if I can paraphrase it like that. One of the main lessons learned recently by reporting from crisis times is to what degree they take part in taking the account of the stand of the majority. And it's a question mark whether it has been established by propaganda that come from all the sides. And the stand of the majority should be respected and observed. These are some of the issues that I would like to raise and discuss with the colleagues that will replace Tanya and Kreshnik. So I would like to invite panelists. They know who they are. I will present them later. From this research, I ask all of you to read the research, and I think the discussion that we shall start now, it will be more interesting. I like it more than the previous reportings, and I want to express my gratitude and to organize a kind of a discussion that what are empty data to be transferred on the ground, and who can speak better for this than our colleagues or we all together? The idea, I have entitled this debate, the idea. The conflict of narrative and the research in reporting from Kosovo. Before I announce the guests, after we conclude with the journalists, I would like to take part not only in posing questions but in making questions. So when we finish the main part, we shall open the discussion. That means questions on research and contribution to the debate. We have here the team editor-in-chief, Zorica, and thank you for being with us today. We also have the editor-in-chief of BIRN.com, Jeta Jora, Internews Kosovo, or this is sufficient enough. Welcome. Thank you. Darko Dimitrijević, editor-in-chief of Radio Gorazdes, and Vera Pulja, I have known Vera for more than 2 decades as the most distinct person of KFOS. But some time ago, she has her own dialogue platform, and she is young for me. If I am not wrong, it's the space for dialogue for changes in the society. I should say that if you have looked at the agenda, you have seen that Violeta Oroshi should have been with us today, but she did not come. Her mother-in-law passed away, and I would make use of the opportunity to express my condolences on my and your behalf. All what we heard so far about the research, about what we privately speak lately, at least as journalists, in the recent year we are in the crisis mode. From a person that comes from an editorial office that exists for 10 years now, but when I speak with colleagues that report all over Kosovo, all journalists that report for Kosovo, from the region, from Belgrade, from the world, all of them agree, and more or less I hear the same sentence. I'm reporting about the crisis or from the crisis zone. Lately we're speaking of Kosovo, so the word is about the north, and it's a similar sentence to what we have been listening for months for the dialogue mediators when they say that we would like to deal more with dialogue mediation than with crisis management. I would like to start this way from Zorica, even though she is a journalist that takes part on the ground, and she reports regularly, not only from Gračanica or Čaglavica, from Pristina, and she's in the north almost every day. Zorica, you have interactions on the ground, even with the colleagues, I mean with Albanians and Serbs, and with the judges and politicians. You were a witness and victim of pressure and obstruction at work. We have seen it frequently, especially the pressure from our experience is proved. So I would like you to share your opinion and your experience, and since we are at the end of the year, we would like to do a general introduction of what you have witnessed, what you have seen increase in the last year. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for the invitation. I should admit that in the last year I spent more time in the north of Kosovo reporting for the events there than for the events in Pristina and Gračanica. As you know, in north, it is a bit more interesting. There is a lot of work to do. It doesn't mean that what is going on there is good. It's the opposite. Too many bad things have happened in the last year. And the most outstanding event, or the worst event according to me, is the one of the 29th of May in Zvečan and on the 24th of September in Banjska, concerning interaction. It is somehow more distinguished with colleagues on the ground, because we are all together and we always wait for someone, be they statements of politicians or of ordinary citizens, or we expect to have something happen. When we speak of statements, I would say that we do not have much luck, because in general we do not take them from people who are responsible to say something. I mean about political shareholders or stakeholders. And those who were in the power and represented Serbs and still do represent them, they usually avoid to share or give statements. Sometimes we have an address where journalists do not have the possibility to pose questions. Press conferences are very rare. And not all media are invited, but only the media that are close to their political party are invited. They do not make statements, as I said, and very often it happens that those independent media do not get the press releases. In addition to those that accuse someone against someone who have a different political opinion about them. Concerning the work in the north, I would say that it was not that easy to report from the north and to get a reply from the citizens, especially after what has happened in Zvečan and then in Banjska. Cases are very rare when someone wants to speak in front of the camera from the fear as to what he or she will declare, from the possible consequences, who can see them on TV, if they could be punished for something like that. The Kreshnik spoke of the people who are conditioned in different manners. They are frightened by the police as to what special units could do to them. Let me be frank. We media, we have become a pain in the neck, because we are always in the north of Kosovo and we want always to ask a question and we want them to tell us something. I don't know what to say. It concerns with verbal threats or attacks and things that happened in the beginning of June in north of Mitrovica, where the trainer of a kickbox team has been arrested, and I was facing a verbal attack by the Serb opposition. When I was attacked by a woman and accused that I went there to increase tensions and to cause a kind of hostility. There were too many cases in May and June when Albanian colleagues were attacked in the north of Kosovo, and their cars have been hit, and this is not good. Concerning the stand in Pristina, or staying in Pristina, it's a bit easier. but we still have problems with translation in some institutions. There was the campaign for the liberalization of visas. We were sent the invitation, both Serb and Albanian media, to attend the event, but there was no translation and all the material was only in Albanian. Concerning cooperation, at the local level, local institutions, I would say there is no cooperation at all, and we inform the public through some statements that we receive from the municipalities, from Krasinska municipality. This is all for the beginning. I just want to add an example to what Zorica said, that information is done selectively so that press releases are not sent to certain media. Last week, the colleague can correct me if I'm wrong, we have the new head of the temporary body in North Mitrovica, and in the first days of his mandate, we had a press release about some activities as to what he will do, and we thought that this press release has come as a mistake because the presiding has their staff did not put us in the list, and he was one of the rare ones that did reply. What happened? At the moment when we published the news, that was not political. It was technical information. They requested from the temporary body, they sent a new email, and there was only my name, and they asked all media to remove the news. They did not say why, but they asked for the removal of the news. If media insisted to know the news, they wanted to get the news from the Facebook. And the interpretation is clear, and we have published and we relied on the release that they had sent, and they sent the release say that it should be removed from Facebook, referring to their Facebook page. Zorica mentioned interaction with the colleagues on the ground, especially when we speak of the events of this year. Every day we have journalist teams in the north. We mentioned some attacks. I will leave this question to Jeta. What do you see, Jeta, as a problem? When we speak of the concrete cooperation between Kosovo, between Serbs and Albanians, and I said it's a rare possibility to meet and to have joint meetings, and my impression is that we lack the essence. We come just for a project and then everybody goes back to his. You defined the topic very well, the collision of the narrative. And when we speak of the narratives, so far we spoke about the problems. We are opted as journalists to see how authorities behave towards us. I would like to concentrate on the weaknesses that we have as a sector and to ask what we could do to create journalists who do not write by colliding with their own selves, the narratives that they write. The resistance that exists because of the lack of exposure that journalists have towards another culture. I want to say this because the elephant in the room We are speaking to cover the other community, but the big elephant in the room is that the journalist should be a fact-checked of the news whether it is true or not, especially for the greatest tension in Kosovo, that is in the north. He will not be able to know because he doesn't know the language of the others. And we expect the journalist to be exact, whether he will be a completed journalist to cover a conflict. He should have the resource of the translator alongside. My job was as a translator when I started my career, and I know that no foreign journalist could write about an armed conflict without translation. Do not forget the Albanian and Serb journalists are expected to cover the greatest tension that is going on from barricades and onwards. They are expected to cover without having communication with Serbs or Serbs without meeting Albanians in their life. It's the first time that most of the journalists that work with me and that we are let us say the most liberal office because our greatest funds come from EU. We are not financed privately or publicly. We are more liberal because our financing is not from any authority that will stop or ban us from reporting freely. And I would say that the journalists cannot report freely, not that somebody hinders him, but he is well educated and he is raised from a situation that he did not have to know Serbian. And now it is the first time that they inform a Serb in a situation of a hostile environment. The first Serb that he will meet is a hostile Serb. He will not meet a normal Serb. An average journalist in Kosovo and a journalist in the media with the most editorial check or control, editorial policy to be more true, to know all the sources and to be more independent, is nevertheless predisposed not to understand the other side. We are expecting a lot. If up to that moment we have created such a system that young people, the average age of journalists in Kosovo, I could say, is under 30. It's 25 to 30, the average age of journalists, Albanians and Serbs. Albanian and Serbian journalists were brought in an education system that differs a lot from each other. Not only the different states educated them, Serbs were educated by Serbian curricula, which says that Kosovo continues to be the heart of Serbia, and those Albanian just happen to be there. The Albanian is educated and learned that Kosovo is freed by KLA together with the NATO, and if they do not read them, they have the culture totally encircled with 99% of Albanian culture. He is a young person who cannot travel sufficiently because of visa limitations, and they do not understand that their brain was grown up in a limited environment, and we expect them to come to a place where a conflict is going on, like in the north, and to obtain a statement from a person who is very agitated, and when he could not have a normal dialogue with a Serbian or a Serbian with an Albanian. We are bypassing all these problems with authorities and sources. The main problem is of cultural nature. Albanians do not understand the culture. A young Albanian, not an Albanian who is over 40 years and who was able to have contacts in the former Yugoslavia. A 25 to 30-year-old Albanian does not understand how to speak and to get information in the Serbian culture. He doesn't understand that he should go in the morning and have some rakia in order to get some information. It's a shock for every journalist to drink rakia. I had to drink a lot of rakia to cover the Serbian side early in the morning, or I would just pour it out aside pretending that I drank it. I could not start the conversation because coffee came together with rakia, and if you did not drink it, something is wrong with you and you are not respecting the owner of the house. So the journalist cannot obtain the best story from government authorities, but from independent sources. And Albanians should go and sit in the guest room and have a cigarette and share the cigarette. Even if you don't smoke, you have to smoke. You should overcome and spend an hour speaking for an hour up to you come to the topic. And I think that a Serb should be shocked to speak for an hour with somebody without rakia, for instance. In such circumstances, we want to speak about what is similar for us, but it would good to say that we have a lot of distinctions, and I learned these distinctions as a translator. On the other hand, I would put another thesis on the table, that we should not lose the chance of a catastrophe, because when something happens like the tension and violent situations such as in North, this is the chance. And I think that sometimes we should, as a collateral damages aside, should be that the last 8 months situation should increase curiosity and incited curiosity to learn Serbian, because they don't like that they don't have information, they cannot read Serbian media, they cannot talk to Serbs, and Serb journalists are totally, they can be in defensive that they cannot speak to Kosovo colleagues and to other Kosovo sources because they are interested to give the message to the Serb community. And for a long time they were not interested in Albanian sources. Now they are. The Serb journalist is blocked in many a time because they do not speak Albanian. They should sit and talk in Albanian with Albanian sources. Our journalist, Albanian journalist, is totally handicapped. He cannot get a source of a Serb family in the north. He says, I came, I tried, and I could not. How did you try? I tried to speak in fingers or in English. Our requests as editors are, Kreshnik is a rare case. So there are exceptions. There is a rare case of a journalist who knows no Serbian, and Serb smugglers came to him and told him the trafficking path. He took a 50-year-old person. He doesn't speak not only speaks Serbian, but he knows to tell jokes in Serbian because he was brought up in Ulpiana. He socialized with the Serbs, and after a year of research, it was a research that Albanian journalists without knowledge of Serbian discovered smuggling, filmed trafficking, money giving to let the truck go by, and the Serb trafficker believed him because there was the Kreshnik's translator. We did not pay him as a translator, but the cameraman was as a translator. We are a more liberal office, EU-friendly, I would say, because we are EU-funded. We have 70 people from whom 2 or 3 know Serbian, because others do not. I am in need of people who speak Serbian and Albanian. We have a competition open because we want to cover. We are the most ambitious media that can best cover the North as the mainstream in Kosovo. Media fail because they do not have the possibility to hire or to employ. We do not have people who speak all the languages. This problem, I don't want to speak only about the problems. I want to say a manner how to solve this problem. This is such a serious problem that it should be resolved with an education agreement in the new Franco-German agreement, that after the Second World War, during the 33 decades from 45 to 80s, because my husband is an Englishman, I know that he was forced to have exchange programs, to go to some German families to stay for a couple of weeks, and Germans would go to English ones. So when they came out of the Second World War, there were programs in Europe where you had to have a pen friend, a German pen friend. As a Frenchman or an Englishman, you had a pen friend at the enemy of the Second World War. The program was as such, and he took part, and he had to write to him and go to a family. I would say that I passed that time as a pioneer in former Yugoslavia, and we went to another republic of former Yugoslavia, spent a week there, and I went to Macedonia, Skopje. I stayed there for a week as a Macedonian family, and they came to us. But of course, to the question that was asked to me there, does your mother stay only at home? And do you have a bathroom in the house, or do you have a bathroom outside? These were the questions that were prejudices as how Albanians were considered as not civilized. But they solved these issues with me. So you have to have contacts with people in order to understand the way they live. The exchange program, how we call it today, you had to do it because it was the strategy of former Yugoslavia. And that we used to live quite a propaganding way, that we have harmony among ethnicities, and a part of them was the exchange with the families of other ethnicities. This program is not only being done with Serbs today, but is not being done between Kosovo and Albania. We do not have only here the splitting of narratives between Kosovo Serbs and Albanians. An Albanian that is brought up in Albania, who has never been in Kosovo. There was a discussion how to make an Albanian of Albania come for a week in Kosovo. Kosovo Albanians go to Albania, but they do not go to some family, but they go to the seaside. There is a lack of a constant discussion between Albanians of Kosovo and Albania, and let alone with Serbs. And we continuously send the journalists in such an exchange. It's the Initiative on Human Rights. They oblige the Albanian journalists to go and sit with an editorial office in Belgrade. But we are here in Kosovo, and this can be done in a very cheap way to sit in others' editorial office. It's a logistics that will always ask for the interpreter. This is another form how to find a solution, to have exchange programs. And the second one is that we are continuously applying for free Serb courses. And we provide free courses for Serbian for our journalists, and the other way around for Serbs to learn Albanian. Without raising the curiosity for language exchange, I do not see that we can reach the phase where they can immediately speak with the sources that we have in the Balkans to cover each other. A journalist that covers the parliament does not have to know Serbian. Those who cover the north, they have such an ambition, and they will have to know Serbian. If not, they will all miss news. And for a Serb journalist, it is crucial to know Albanian in order to cover Pristina reports. He may not know. Although we live in the Google Translate world, you can put the things to be translated. And I don't think that as a journalist you will produce a qualitative article or approach or opinion if you do not culturally understand the opponent. If you do not sit and spend 2 or 3 hours with the opponent. We had a good story about the trafficking in the north that resulted with the 50 persons arrest, Albanians and Serbs. Only so we had to gather lunches with Serbs and Serbs with Albanians in order to understand each other, and then to try and to film. We still need such things to happen, and I will confirm you, Tatiana, that the event is one of the rare ones that we have communication between Kosovo Serbs and Albanians. In 19 there was a bigger investment in interethnic communication. Now with the donors, the investment is not focused in encouraging the interethnic conversation or talk among young people. I do not see programs for youth, interstate and interethnic. I cannot see them compared to what used to be in the 90s. There were more in the 90s, and donors were not even the 5% of the donors that currently exist in Kosovo. So we are in a world when we have more possibilities for information. It does not mean that we can be less isolated and living in a monoethnic bubbling. And this is monoethnic bubbling. I'm glad that it has been teased, and I am sorry that it has been teased because we had Banjska and barricades. I saw a bigger curiosity and the spite to learn the language only because of the violence in the recent month. If violence is to insert to learn somebody else's language, then it's okay. Thank you, Jetta. The problems are complicated, whereas solutions are simple. I do not know what yet I was going to speak about, and I am very glad that she pointed the stress on a language. So we have underestimated the knowledge of languages, especially Serbs from Kosovo have a special problem when we speak of the language. But I completely agree that this is not a political problem, but is a cultural problem, and the simplest way is to learn the language, and it is only the beginning. But I would not speculate, but a large part of the problem would be resolved if we speak the other's language, and this way we would show that we respect the identity and the culture of the other, and then we would not present ourselves as such. So in this way we should learn to respect the others. I entitled this panel as between collision and narrative, because what we were speaking from the very beginning is that we are not in a kind of a sandwich, but in a conflict or collisions of our experiences. If somebody asks me to describe in a couple of words of what media do in Albanian and Serbian, but in general, what is one of the key problems of Albanians and Serbs, I would say, is the conflict of narratives. My personal impression is that, especially in the last 2-3 years, we are proving the propaganda offensive, and the culmination of such a narrative is seen in the last months, starting from barricades, the removal from institutions, and license plates, elections boycott, second elections, the placing of mayors by the means of the police, then the conflict with KFOR up to Banjska. I said many times publicly, I calculate the time before and after Banjska in every context, and I think it's subjective, and it is the same for my compatriots. I notice a mainstream rooted in both sides. The mainstream, the media mainstream rooted in both cultures, and which is also harmful, as if it were tailored to all the manners. And this has a great impact. And something that I learned recently as to how difficult it is for objective media to defend themselves and not to respect the stand of the majority and the mainstream, and not to take into account what the mainstream in. I think that Darko is a good interlocutor for this topic, because he comes from a media compared to Pristina, Čaglavica, the north. He is inferior, but it is more vulnerable. Darko comes from Goraždec, and I would not ask, but what is your vision for our experiences of the truth? What is your experience and what is your truth? I will link with this one. So when we speak of rakia and cigarettes, I do not smoke and I do not drink rakia, but with my Albanian colleagues, especially in Peja and Prizren, we have very good relations, and we have coffee. It doesn't have to be that we should have a cultural barricade. I learn Albanian, but I do not speak it that well. I speak for a bit of older generations. Some of them speak, some of younger. Just so as to understand, I said I would say we agree. When we speak of the narrative, when we speak of the truth and everything that we have today in our entire space, not in Kosovo and Serbia, but even wider, in the last 2 months, I had the possibility to be part of some international workshops or seminars where I met colleagues from public broadcasters from these territories. But most of them told me, hey, here is one of the colleagues from Kosovo Radio Television, from Montenegro Radio Television, but we are to represent the state policy. What do I want to say? It is painful when the journalist in a public broadcaster or whatever kind of broadcaster represents the state public policy and not the public interest. This best speaks about the situation, to what degree our public space is contaminated, and this poisoning narrative is spread very hideously. Differences are large and they are best reflected. Last month I had an interview from Birnin Podgorica concerning the media situation, and we linked with the situation that occurred in Banjska. The colleague said, look at the media in Belgrade and Pristina, as if the word is not about the same event. The situation is very bad when we speak of the reporting which speaks of the differences of the media that report in Serbian or in Albanian. And to support this, we have the fact that in these public frequencies, national frequencies, be it for Albanians or Serbs, when you turn whatever Belgrade channel in Belgrade, you can listen a lot of foolish things that have nothing to do with the reality in Kosovo. Or in Kosovo, we have some analysts who are paid per diem to take part in programs. We hear foolish things about the Serbs that have no truth with the facts. So we lack the essence. This is what is problematic. We have, for instance, the case of Banjska that the colleague from Podgorica described best, but what we should do to change our manner or our approach towards them. We have the situation that in the part of the media from Belgrade, those people who were armed there as attackers against Kosovo police, they are presented as heroes. On the other hand, we have a television in Kosovo that has thousands of followers in social media. The special police is listening to KLA songs, or the Miashari songs. Are they people now terrorists? Are they KLA members or police members? Now, the same KLA leaders are being judged for the most serious crimes in The Hague. Let us not think about this and how it poisons our readers and viewers. Let us see what is the public interest. Is it of public interest to have a productive approach so that people can learn language, socialize, communicate with each other, or to fight among themselves? It's not only politicians who are responsible. I agree. I think that Kreshnik mentioned that journalists should have filters. They should have filters, of course. But in certain situations, they should be very careful when they produce something. The things that you mentioned today have been produced by journalists, be they from Belgrade. I think it was TV 10. It's not important. We all make mistakes. But the essence is that we should try not to make cardinal mistakes, not to make ethnic mistakes. Let us listen to each other and not to attack each other. The essence is here. Everything else in journalist reports is political agenda. If we do not respect the minimum of what is called public interest, we become part of a certain political agenda. Let us not speak for various examples of hatred, language of hatred around Banska, when the director of the channel at RTK broadcast in Serbian was dismissed. So journalists should gather and protest. So whether we share the same opinion or not. Why was he dismissed? Has he committed any verbal delict? There is no solidarity. This is another serious obstacle, and I think that we should try as individuals and as media and as part of the society to have much more. I think that during the COVID times we had many more examples. When an Albanian in Kamenica helps an old lady, we transmitted this news. Bern did a interview from Goman of Dechan. When Dechan is presented in media, they did a solidarity story as to how local communities had helped them during the war. I know these stories are not popular. They come into the judgment of media. I know, for instance, that the situation during the placement of the patriarch and the mayor sat next to him. Some media transmitted it and some other media transmitted it in a bad way, some in a good way. So Novak Djokovic, the tennis player. But I would like to say that we as journalists and first of all as human beings, we should try the public interest, to have the public interest above any political agenda and to solidarize with each other. The language, I totally agree with Jeta. We should learn the language of the environment where we live. I am from the editorial office that functions in a municipality with Albanian majority. But I speak Albanian, not that much. We can understand easily, but it's very good to know. And it's also a criminal responsibility when some hooligans or people who protest in the north. It's criminal responsibility. But it is also the responsibility of the editor who sends an unprepared and young journalist who speaks not a single word of the culture of the people where he is going to. As editor-in-chief of a media where 10 people say, I would not send a person in a situation where I would be sure that he would not be able to understand. So media editors are responsible as well. But I would not end with the pessimist lines. It is contaminated, poisoned with the negative narratives. But if we try some simple things like a language to overcome these cultural differences, maybe to be more solidarious, I think that we can do much better as media, as journalists, and as all communities, which in a sense is the purpose that the public narrative should be like that. You marked the International Day. This was my message as well for the Association of Journalists. And I am tired that every year when we have the Day of Freedom of Media, we should have something correct. And in fact, the beginning and the end of everything is solidarity. This is what is expected from us. I should add that this journalist solidarity exists. We have seen it in the north during reporting. The Serb and Albanian journalists were on the ground and they cooperated, they defended each other. When some colleagues from Albanian office could not get out from the cafeteria, they were helped by some colleagues to get away from that area. Yes. That day, on the 29th of May, all of us used the spaces of a cafeteria near the municipality where everything was happening. We had Albanian colleagues and the journalists of Serb media, and we all reported for something that was happening. But when crazy things started to happen and when it became unsafe for all of us, Albanian colleagues did not dare to get away from the cafeteria, and the cafeteria owner showed them the way. Then he became the target of social media. He was labeled by various people, by platforms that are quite active now. And the following day we solidarized with him and we sent a joint message to support the person that really helped those people get away. But he also was helped by some Serbian colleagues who showed them the way. So we cooperated on the ground. New Albanian colleagues who do not speak Serbian, we help them by translating what Srpska Lista representatives talked on the ground. This was kind of a cooperation. When we speak of this cooperation, Vera Pulja is committed for years in the dialogue process, multiculturalism. Maybe it's my feeling as to what you have been worked in those 2 last decades concerns cooperation, dialogue, multiculturalism between the parties. She was responsible for media projects, journalist projects. And it was intertwined with the cooperation of the interethnic component. And today Vera leads her platform Space. And I would like finally for our panel, I would like Vera to give some spice to the discussion and share your experience, whether you see a regress or progress in our societies. If it is progress, where is it reflected? And the regress, what are your impressions concerning media scene in Kosovo and in Belgrade? Since you are involved in both societies and you are very active from the media content that indirectly impacted in the media content. Do you notice any difference in creating media content in the last years? That last crisis is going on. Thank you, Tanya. On that, I would start saying that I live in both societies because simply I come from a mixed marriage, ethnically mixed marriage, And what I want to say in regards to this is that this is quite a personal thing. This entire conflict impacts emotionally on me. In a sense, I have no problem to understand what it is not, but very frequently it hurts me. I would say at the beginning, although you mentioned it, I am a consumer of media content, and I am not always disciplined in this. When it becomes too painful, then I leave it, make some pause, and then continue. I used to work for a long time in this sector, and by time I noticed, but less, certain changes, because you notice the difference only some time later. And when you get away a bit from the work that you do, no, I would say I am too far to be able to notice the changes. And sometimes I ask myself, and the environment where I live, and sometimes I criticize and I praise them. In addition to our societies go in parallel with the other part of the world concerning technology. First of all, our societies in general are tired with the long conflict, be it frozen or active. I do not understand with this only armed conflict, although it has happened, but I'm speaking of the narrative conflict. And now I shall speak a bit about the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. That is going on for more than 10 years now, and it contributed to a large degree, I would say, to a conflict of narratives. This conflict is mostly seen in the political discourse that slowly in the last 10 years is becoming more aggressive, less tolerant, and quite confronting. I see a big regress in it that impacted on the relations between communities on the ground and the media. That in most of the cases followed the same tone or similar one. I speak of the colored media, be they media, as Darko said, public broadcasters who think that they should follow the tone of the government in that moment, whereas the voice of the other media, which probably, not probably, but they are independent, simply they could not be heard, or so they would not be heard. Because to the degree that I follow, there are a lot of media now, there are a lot of portals as well. There are a lot of people who, in most of the cases, are informed through social media networks that contain positive and negative comments, fans, and this contaminates the general opinion of the society, and it creates a kind of an echo. The same way, this dialogue in a way has impacted on the promotion of our society, and I mean about the development of the media scheme. The Serb media in Kosovo existed even before the dialogue process, but they increased in numbers and in professionalism as of the start of the dialogue. I think that there is a kind of collegiality developed, which is proved from the ones that's mentioned earlier among the journalists who reported in various languages. which is a great movement concerning 1990s and the first year after the war. Now we have examples of getting information from media in Albanian that they have quite a good translation in Serbian. There is a less percentage of news that are got or obtained from Serb media in Albanian. Although we have producers like Yeta or outlets that produce stories concerning the Serb community in Kosovo as well. As someone who used to work with Serb media in Kosovo, I am totally satisfied that the media I used to work with are more open for the opposite stand and opinion, for the freedom of speech and their advancement in the professional context. The situation is similar or the same in Albanian media, that news from the minority regions are rare. Media in Serbia have the problem of inclusion because the other part is a minority. The smaller the minority, the greater their needs, and the obligation of the state to take care for these obligations. Nonetheless, you can see competition between ruling party and opposition, and I think that the media that transmit those news are lost. The meaning of those messages is lost depending on the media that broadcast them. I think that broadcasting about the crisis in the north was quite chaotic. In order to get an overview, a general overview, you should follow media in Albanian and Serbian from Kosovo and Serbia from all the parties. I still am not sure, although I am a follower of media, if there is a clear and real vision of them. My personal opinion for that day, since I spent all the day in front of the laptop, TV, and phone, I could not understand what was going on, and at the end of the day, I felt as a blown-off balloon, as if I were in a kind of fog and I needed some instructions to get out. Maybe it happened too quickly, but now the situation seems to me much clearer than it used to be. But that day was really very, very chaotic. Thank you. We overcome the timetable. We do not. I am always, if somebody whoever wants or needs my help, they can contact me. I spoke more about the general situation and condition as to what the ruling party or the government wants to silence Clan Kosovo, or the managing board removes RTK1 director. There are things when we have differences between editorial offices. So there we should have near stances, and we should not agree on everything, but it is necessary to cooperate in those circumstances. And I meant the solidarity, the overall solidarity. Sometimes I do not notice it among communities. Vera, thank you for this. Very simply, I was describing my experiences, and I think that most of us felt the same, especially when we speak of Banska. It was quite factic, and there was objective reason to say that there was a police action, something that had not happened so far. It was not clear, although we were physically there. And we had a propaganda war, but I don't want to enlarge the story more. Thank you very much for the compliment. I don't want to praise my horse, as we say. I want to speak for all of us that we are here. We are not that much. But among the big propaganda here, although we are smaller in capacity, I think that I believe that we are more aware and conscious about the situation, even though we are much clearer. Just a technical information. I don't know if we can continue the discussions or I would like you to ask questions or to comment or to contribute in this interlocution. What are your experiences about the research or about the panel? Or if you would like to add something else, you're free to do it.
Hi, I actually have two questions. The first one being about BIRN, which media were monitored in Kosovo, and whether you saw any divide between Kosovo Albanian and Kosovo Serbian media in case you monitored both of them, because we didn't get this mention, whereas we heard from you which ones you mentioned. And the other question is, most of you actually mentioned that there are not enough news about the daily lives of the citizens. Why is this? Is it that editors and journalists do not want to cover those news? Or is it that citizens do not want to consume this news? Because I also have a theory behind that based on the news that we put out. I think that sometimes even the good news, the ones that are about the daily lives, are not as fast picked up by media the way political statements are by default. So I don't know what is because I'm working for a totally different organization. I want to see your point of view in how you approach this.
I'll answer the second while Krishnik prepares to list the media. I was amazed as well, just confirming the last time. There's a water problem in Pristina. I don't know if you know about it. There's an issue with polluted water right now. We had a debate on it, which today has 700, immediately after it broadcasts, has 700 views. Anything you write with Banska would have 10,000. Yes. So I don't depend on money I get from views, but all my colleagues in private sector, all my colleagues moderators, are driven by views, religiously watch their news, and they cannot afford, they tell me, and we have this common conversation all the time, why they are not covering anything but politics. Because our consumer, and whether it's a mutual feeding each other type of thing, I don't know, but I noticed this, that when we do daily life that does not depend on politics, if it's corruption, it's still watched. If it's corruption and not politics, it's judicial, it's watched. But bad news is also about water. Like we had 4 key institutions of Kosovo talking about whether you should drink water or not. And this is key information, whether you need to buy water or drink water, and when is it going to stop, and what's going to change, with 4 institutional people speaking about it. Hardly watched. So I will give you this, and I will tell you that it must be something mutually that we are doing, but as well that if you sit at home, you somehow want a little bit of the soap opera in Kosovo. I lived in UK. In UK, the soap opera was really EastEnders, like a series about a family and the gossip on that family, or let's say Big Brother is soap opera. Here it's not as much. In UK, mainstream was people were interested on celebrities, what they do, and soap opera. Here, celebrities are politicians. For good or for bad, people are not interested in culture or music or even turbo folk as much as in politics. The characters of the politics are soap opera. And the evening news is all the evening debates, all talk about these characters as if they were, I don't know, Taylor Swift. In the Western world, Taylor Swift generates the most news. With us, Kurti and Vucic generates the most news. We don't have a Taylor Swift phenomenon. Surreal, but that's how it is.
Can I be heard? Express, Bliss, Telegraph, Kosovo Online, and RTK Wellington, Kosovo are being monitored as two TV stations. In Serbia, we have Danas, Bliss, Kurir, Novosti, and 3 televisions, RTS1, RTS2, and Ping. The sample is very small compared to 5 others. That's why we compared it. What is reported in Kosovo, from Kosovo in Serbian media. So in Serbian media, the sources of information are from Serbia, whereas in Kosovo, sources information are Kosovo politicians, and it does not have a conflict or a temptation to challenge a narrative. I'm just interested to know. I'm just interested to know, why have you selected Kosovo Online from the media in Serbian? We have a measurement of clicks in media social for portals, but based on this, we had the clicks and video materials that were uploaded, and we saw that were citations in Serbia as a medium. This does not mean that they have a bigger link in media, but this was the reason why it was included. There was quotation in Serbia by Kosovo Online as a medium.
Klikovi nisam to razumela. A, u Srbiji najviše, u mainstream medijima.
Mainstream medija.
Mogu još samo da dodam dve rečenice how we selected the media actually. We wanted to cover the mainstream, the main narrative. So we selected media based on how popular they are, how big their audience share is. But we also wanted to select media that have different editorial policies. So these are 2 criteria that we took. So being the popular ones, but also to cover various specters of the editorial policies. For example, in Serbia, you would see that we picked, for example, Novosti. They're not necessarily the most popular one, but they are the most, for example, right-wing one, and so on, yeah. And Kosovo
Online. Any questions? If no one has any question, maybe we are hungry, we could end. I would just like you for one or short sentence as to what you think is important to say in the end of today's day in general. I will speak in Albanian to know exactly that I am with one and the other side as well. That I was invited to this panel. Maybe I wanted to stress or to highlight what was said by the three representatives of media here, that solidarity is very important, not only in media, but in society in general. Solidarity has been lost in general. I think sometime before the pandemic, and it needs a refreshment. I would end it with this. In order for the narrative that reigns in the public spaces in Kosovo and Serbia to be better, I think we should try to overcome differences and to focus more on the ethic, public interest, citizens above all. We spoke earlier that there are some political topics, national topics or issues. They are more viewed. But there are local topics that are very important, and the audience expects them and reacts fairly well against them. In most visible media, I can mention many examples, but I don't think we should. I consider that this is the essence, the overcoming of differences.
Maybe I should say this in English as a common language for all. Since language was my the theory of conflict resolution, one way to conflict resolute. I want to end in a good note, in a positive note, that we have examples. To answer Johanna about clicks on something else you asked, when we have a Serbian guest in the program, which we try to do because we are covering the North, we have made a rule, you can't talk about a conflict with the Serbian community or anything to do with Serbs if you don't have a Serb in the studio, even if it takes many more hundreds of euros to subtitle everything and get translators all the time for us. The plus is that the positive note is that we have an audience who is interested in the Serb panelist. All the debates with our Serb panelists is most often has been Acar Sinjević, because he was willing to travel to Pristina, or Bane Krstić. They are very watched. Even though all the other media have had programs that evening about the North, and we have a saturated audience to hear about the North, we have thousands and thousands more views because we have the Serb in the panel. So on a positive note for me is that it pays to have the other side, even views-wise. In times of conflict, I'm not saying this is that other stories we do socially, culturally to show there is multicultural and multi-ethnic communication. In times of conflict, when majority of people, like some people were upset with Aca's victim narrative in the show and were really, we had bad comments. Nevertheless, for us it's important that people, eventually, he started off with that narrative, eventually the audience got used to him, and he got used to Albanian panelists. It was a mutual, I could see a trail of transformation from the tolerance the audience had about having him in times when Kosovo police was hurt, was wounded, and Aca was there representing almost the guy who wounded the police and had a lot of hate speech against him. But slowly his language got less extreme, and our audience got more tolerant to accepting him. So what I want to say is our investment and risk with putting investment in terms of money spent on literally money spent on production and subtitling, for us it can be returned with sometimes with YouTube views that pay for that translation. Sometimes that cost is returns back. And that is a good point, that we have an audience that doesn't block the other side. It's actually curious on the other side. So it's saturated with one ethnic debate, Albanians between themselves talking about the north. This is the 80% of debates in Kosovo. Albanians themselves with each other, disagreeing, but with each other. It pays off to have a Serb in the panel. For me, as majority, representing the majority, let's say, media with majority Albanian audience, it pays off. One. Second, that's why civil society exists. There's no other point to do journalism rooted in civil society if we are the ones who don't risk having the other side in the panel. And having not just the converted side or liberal side, you know, it's having Sonja Biserko on the panel, let's say. The important thing is having an authentic Serb who's going to present his if to Albanians looks a nationalistic point of view. And that sort of voice is very, very, let's say, rewarding to have in our reporting. And there's no other point why we should exist if we don't offer our space to that sort of voice too. Civil society is obliged to do that, even if other media don't do that. It's our duty.
Dakle, kada je u pitanju Aleksandar Arsenijević, ja moram da kažem da on ima...
When Alexandra Ivic is in question, I can say that he has a lot of power to know the news and he is useful for the media. And that he is sufficient enough for the news. But I would like to mention two things that Kreshnik mentioned. The first one concerning filters. Journalists should really filter the statements of a politician that frequently are inducive and not true. They should be checked to see the authenticity of what has been said. There are always more and more media that transmit false statements or press releases coming from various political factors, be it the Office for Kosovo and Metohija, that we receive press releases every day that are quite offensive against those who do not think the same as them politically. Politicians have become the main source of information. This is true, and I should mention the Office for Kosovo and Serbia. The Office for Kosovo and Metohija notifies us about the incidents that take place. There was a press release about throwing stones in Kamenica somewhere. They are not the first media that come out with the news, but it has become the office and follow independent media. That's it. I would like to thank the panelists, the authors of the research, and first of all, you that came and had patience from the point of view of someone that consumes the news, and to see from inside what we as journalists have to say. Or to wrap up in a sentence, what Zorica said was important. We expect something, and while we expect something with solidarity, as Darko said, to speak with the language of each other, and to assess each other, as Jeta said. As to what I understand, I saw myself in what Vera said, and not to feel as a blown-up balloon. So let us conclude. So we are expecting the lunch that has come. Thank you.